Hi, boys and girls. Today we're going to talk about our big question of what do we need to gain independence, right? That is our big question that we're going to try to answer after all of these sources that we see, but not today. We're not going to worry about it today, okay? Today our focus is on our smaller question, which is how did colonies establish their own government? How did colonies establish or make their own government, right? How did they come up with their own government? How did they know who is going to be in charge of who? How did they know what the rules were going to be or the expectations? How did that all come to be? Okay? So that is our big question for today. Before we get into our sources, you need to choose your graphic organizer that you're going to use. You have two choices. These are your two choices. You've seen these before. Our first choice of graphic organizer is where you have those three boxes. This one's going to work really well if you have someone at home that you want to talk to about these sources, okay? So if you look closer, just a reminder, we've already seen this, but I'm going to go over it again. Your first box right here, it says number blank. That's to put the source number in, okay? And then there's a box for my thoughts in this bold box. Those are just your thoughts, not complete sentences, not necessarily correct or incorrect, just your thoughts about after looking at that source right away, okay? Then that group box. This is going to be something that I've talked about, but that we are going to use when we get back into the classroom. So not necessarily something you need at home online. So you can put an X through group. We're going to see that in the classroom, but I want you to be used to it. And then partner. This is where you're going to talk with someone at home. Maybe it's a grown-up, maybe it's a sibling, older, younger, maybe it's a stuffed animal, maybe it's yourself. It can be anybody, right? Again, boys and girls, it's going to be so much easier when we get into the classroom because we'll have groups of people and we'll have partners. Even if it's 6 feet apart, we'll have them, okay? So you can choose that graphic organizer. To choose a graphic organizer, if you want to choose this one, you just click on it and click on its link right there, and it'll have you make a copy that you can type in. Or you can click on the number up here, and it's going to do the same thing. Okay? If you don't like that graphic organizer or you don't have someone at home, that's okay. You can choose this one. This one is a little more basic. It has 4 boxes for 4 sources. We might not even have 4 sources. You might have 2. You might have 3. You might have 4. But you might have 3. Okay? And in these boxes, you're going to just put down your thoughts on that source. How is that source relating to our question of today? How did colonies establish their own government, right? So let's go ahead and look at our first source. You ready? If you're not ready and you need to download this, you can pause the video and go ahead and open up the template that you want. So at this time, you can pause the video, open up your template, and be ready to go. So choose 1 or 2. 1 or 2. Go ahead, pause the video, and choose your graphic organizer. All right, hopefully you paused the video, but now we're going to go on and we're going to see our first source, okay? Here is our first source for today. I'm going to read it out loud, and I want you to read it out loud or in your brain with me as I read it aloud. Each of the 13 colonies had a charter or written agreement between the colony and the King of England or Parliament. All right, now remember, we need to read something 3 times. Everything we need to read 3 times, no matter what it is. Because the first time you read it, you're just reading it to figure out what the words are. So even as a grown-up, I didn't necessarily understand that fully. So I'm going to go back and read it a second time. All right, let's read it again. Each of the 13 colonies had a charter or written agreement. So charter is also a written agreement. Those are the same things, right? So charter or written agreement between the colony and the King of England or Parliament. Good. Now, hopefully you're understanding it a little bit more. We're going to read it the 3rd time and try to totally understand it and connect some dots, okay? Each of the 13 colonies, we know our 13 colonies, right, were those first colonies where people were coming over from England, right, had a charter or written agreement. So they had a written agreement. They wrote it down, agreed to something between the colony and the King of England. So they had a written agreement to say what they would do between the colony and the King of England so that they were on the same page. Just like when we sign in school, just like when you sign the contract that says you're going to follow the school expectations, right? You're going to walk on the line, you're going to stay 6 feet apart, you're going to wear your face mask, right? Those things, those were written down and agreed upon. Okay? Now I'm going to stop talking because sometimes I talk too much. And I want you to pause the video, and I want you to go to your graphic organizer and jot down your thoughts as how this source answers our question of how did colonies establish their own government? How did those colonies come up with their own government that worked, right? Does this talk about that? 13 colonies had a written agreement between the colony and the king. Does that help them establish their own government? Jot down some of your own thoughts in those boxes. If you're in Graphic Organizer 2, then you're good to just jot down your thoughts on how this answers our question or a part of our question. If you're using Graphic Organizer 1, go ahead and jot down your ideas and then talk with someone at home, a stuffed animal, a neighbor, call them up on the phone, or socially distance and talk with someone, okay? Pause the video now to do that. All right, hopefully you paused the video long enough. If you didn't, you can go ahead and pause it again, but we're going to go on to our source number 2. Source number 2. By the 1770s, many colonists were angry because they did not have self-government. This meant that they could not govern themselves and make their own laws. All right, let's read it a second time. By the 1700s, many colonists were angry because they did not have self-government. This meant that they could not govern themselves and make their own laws.